Yeah, so today's topic is going to be stress. So what is stress? How do we identify that maybe we're feeling stressed or anxious? What is helpful stress versus unhelpful stress? How do we distinguish between those two? How do we manage stress? And it covers some techniques that include things like mindfulness, deep breathing, guided meditations, progressive muscle relaxation, just kind of depending on what we have time for. I'm going to open it also up to any questions at the end, but I encourage you all, if you have any questions along the way, to ask them. You can speak them out. You can use the chat box. If you have any experiences to share, I often find that we can learn as much from each other as I bring to the table. So what is stress? How do you all recognize when you're feeling stressed? What are your signs?
I play with my hair a lot. Like I just have like little like weird like I'm like wow.
Good example.
In the chat, we have circular thinking, shaking legs, sweating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean it looks different for everybody. But yeah, fidgeting, that's a really common one. So hair twirling, shaking your leg. Yeah, I noticed that I have difficulty sleeping. Like when I'm really stressed, I'll lay awake thinking about like, oh my God, what do I have to do tomorrow? What could I have done differently today? So there are a lot of things that contribute to stress, things that are in our environment. So this can look like, being in maybe a confined space, being in a room that's overly heated. Maybe it's noisy or there's bad lighting. This can look like social or interpersonal stressors. So, dealing with rude or aggressive people. Maybe there's interpersonal conflicts in our lives with friends, roommates, colleagues, life events. So, living in a global pandemic is stressful, and it's chronic and ongoing. Um, and in addition to some of these external factors, we have these internal factors, which tend to be things that we're more in control of. So this can look like lifestyle choices, like how much sleep are we getting? What does our sleep hygiene look like? Um, this can look like negative self-talk. We all have messages that we send ourselves throughout the day. Some of those are more encouraging messages than others. I think it can be helpful just to be aware of what are some of these automatic thoughts and how are they, influencing your stress or anxiety. Common example I like to use is public speaking. So for those of you who don't like speaking publicly, or maybe it makes you feel anxious, you might find yourself thinking things like, this is going to suck, or I'm really scared, or I'm going to look stupid, or any number of things that can actually influence or maintain that anxiety. So what is stress? I think it's helpful to think about it as a biological, natural, physiological response, right? It's our fight or flight system that has evolved to protect us. So anxiety today might look more like, or less like, being chased by a hungry animal, and more like a perceived threat. Right. So there's something that happens in our bodies physiologically, like the release of adrenaline and cortisol. We might notice an increased heart rate, rapid breathing. It can look like mental alertness, or it can look like difficulty concentrating. But there's this physiological process that's happening that's actually bidirectional. And I think that's really important to note. So sometimes we experience these physical symptoms in response to our thoughts, or a response to our environment, but we can also control those physical symptoms to a degree in which that it can affect our anxiety. And so one of those ways is biofeedback. Another way that we're going to talk about today is through breathing exercises. So, yeah, we talked a little bit about signs of stress. So, most of the examples you all gave were behavioral examples. So things like nervous habits or fidgeting. Other behavioral examples can be things like crying or procrastinating is a huge one. Changes in eating, or coping with other substances like alcohol, tobacco, marijuana. Um, Physical signs of stress, things like fatigue, headache, insomnia. You might notice sweating. You might notice a change in your immune system. So if you find yourself getting colds a lot, or not sleeping well, that could be signs of stressors. Things like on the flip side of some of the mental alertness you might experience with optimal stress, you might have difficulty concentrating, which can really affect your memory, both encoding information as well as recalling it. Things like indecisiveness. What am I going to eat today? I can't make another decision. And then emotional, we often see that's pretty common: anxiety, depression, irritability, or impatience. So stress happens on a continuum. There's acute stressors, so things that are like single identifiable events. And then there are chronic stressors, like tend to be more ongoing. Who can think of an example of an acute stressor?
A test coming up.
Yes, good one.
In the chat, Caitlin said schoolwork.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, this happens on a spectrum. It can be an exam, it can be a car accident, any sort of single stressful, isolated event. What about chronic stressors or more ongoing stressors? What are some examples?
Bills.
Mm-hmm. Bills, finances, totally.
In the chat, we have losing a job or divorce, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, Job loss, divorce. Yeah, being a student can be stressful. Again, living in a pandemic is stressful. And there's intersections between these stressors too. So unlike the acute stressors, which are maybe more identifiable, some are, maybe more subtle, or maybe there's a lot of overlap between stressors. Um, so stress is not always a bad thing. And those of you who like to procrastinate might already be aware of this. So there is a certain amount of alertness or focus, attention, sometimes a state of flow that can happen when we're feeling stress. This is often referred to as eustress or positive stress versus distress or negative stress. So stress helps us to really engage in challenging work. And we seek it out through various ways, right? Through physical exercise or sports and competition, by watching scary movies or riding roller coasters. There's a certain amount of adrenaline that can be beneficial, that can help us with our productivity, that can be fun. So if you think again about stress on a continuum, this bell curve sort of represents, if you're experiencing too little stress, maybe you're sort of underwhelmed, there's a lack of interest or engagement, you may be apathetic or not motivated. And then again, this optimum stress for performance, for engagement, for flow. But then there's that fine line where you can easily, if you experience too great of a stressor or maybe chronic stress, where you go over into this sort of feeling overloaded, feeling exhausted. And when it becomes a real problem, we see a lot of symptoms of anxiety or panic, anger. Anger and irritability is a really common symptom of depression that people don't tend to recognize. So this is burnout on this end. How are we all doing at this time of the semester? Where do you all fall in the spectrum?
Right? And that anxiety, panic, anger. I mean, shoot, there's a lot going on.
Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, and it's not static, right? So this can look very different day to day. But the more chronic our stress, the more we tend to fall towards this end of the spectrum. So helpful ways of managing stress can look like prioritizing. And this might seem obvious to folks, like prioritizing, work or school over, certain other activities. But it can also look like, just being aware of your values, so what sort of self-care values do you have? What sort of relational values do you have? Are you a person who recharges by being around other people or by being by yourself? And prioritizing that self-care. Time management. So keeping a planner is great for this. I think I always tell students it's important to actually schedule in self-care time. That's actually just as important to write down and hold sacred as some of your other appointments. Take breaks. This is really hard, but all the more important given that everything is online right now. So I find when I'm sick, I can still go to work because I'm sitting at home in front of a computer. I can power through it. But again, just establishing those boundaries so when you're off, you're really off. I have one of those features on my phone that marks my amount of screen time used, and I can tell if I'm up in percentage or down certain weeks. And it's sort of alarming given that I spend, 40 hours plus a week on a computer. What am I doing on my phone, 3 or whatever hours? So taking that into account as well. Sleep. So sleep is obviously important, not just quality or quantity, but again, sleep hygiene. So disconnecting from screens an hour before you go to sleep, going to bed and waking up at the same time can be really invaluable. Um, Moderating caffeine, I don't tend to feel as good after my third cup of coffee, um, despite it tasting very good. Regular exercise, always important. Finding time to relax or meditate. Again, just being really intentional about that time that we're taking to ourselves. Um, Checking in with your automatic thoughts and how that might relate to some of your core beliefs. I find that journaling can be really helpful. Just jotting down, like maybe when I'm triggered is a strong word, but maybe when I'm noticing that I'm having a strong reaction to something, good or bad, just like what am I thinking about this and what are some of the accompanying feelings, can provide a lot of insight. Developing realistic expectations. So, again, and this is the era of COVID, we may not be as productive as we were, a year ago. We are dealing with a lot of stressors, which is going to affect us, in ways that we're still learning about. Um, Positive reframing can be really helpful. Again, along the same lines of journaling. Has anybody heard about like a gratitude journal? Has anybody dabbled in this? Yeah, yeah. So great exercise. Oftentimes, nice exercise is 3 good things, just reflecting on 3 good things that happened to me today. I use this exercise at the dinner table with my kids, like, what is something kind you noticed today? Just that reorientation to the positive, to what's happening that's good in my life. Support systems are so important. Activating those support systems, reaching out to people that, you know, um, we may have not talked to in a while. And that could be family members, that could be rekindling friendships, that could just, make sure that we're, dropping a line to people we haven't seen in a while. Seeking out humor, if anybody has any good movie recommendations, I'm always looking for a good comedy. I mean, really put them in the chat box. So not so helpful ways to manage stress. And these, may seem obvious, but again, they're helpful to remind ourselves of. So avoiding the problem. Avoidance is really tempting when we're dealing with anything that is disturbing or distressing or uncomfortable. But oftentimes avoiding confronting it can sort of maintain the problem. Alcohol and other drugs. So yeah, Oftentimes talking with students, we'll explore how this is, really great for managing our feelings in the moment, right? But distally or longitudinally, sometimes we get a lot of the other side effects that are not so great. I'm taking it out on others. Like I mentioned, anger being a symptom of depression. If you find yourself feeling more irritable, this can be a sign that you're dealing with a lot of stress, and a good way of checking in with yourself. Watching too much TV or playing too many video games, I don't know. That's one of my coping strategies right now is Netflix. So I think it's just knowing yourself and checking in with yourself about, is this working for me right now? And also being forgiving with yourself for, okay, sometimes you just need to unplug. Isolating yourself, unless that's how you relax. Even introverts, though, need social connection. So I would, encourage people to recognize that. So there's a number of different ways that we can relax in the moment. I'm going to list some of these here. So these are great things you can use when you're feeling stressed or anxious, or even if you're having a panic attack. They tend to work best when we practice them daily. And they're really short. Each of these takes 3 to 5 minutes to do and can be really beneficial, especially if we have a ritual of practicing them. So the first one, 3-step breathing, is just this idea of breathing in for a count of 3, holding for 3 seconds and breathing out. And I'll encourage you guys to do this all with me. If you can find yourself seated upright with your feet planted on the ground, think about a string sort of aligning your head and kind of pulling your neck up. You want to breathe in through your nose for a count of 3. Hold for 3, and then out. Some people find it's helpful to breathe in through their nose. Some people like to breathe out through pursed lips, kind of like you're blowing through a straw. Breathing is so important. So like what we mentioned with this physiological response, we can control some other things. We can slow our heart rate. We can reduce the amount of oxygen coming to our brain, which can be really helpful, especially if we're hyperventilating. So we can really control that anxiety if we are really in command of our breathing. Mindfulness. How many people here practice mindfulness in any form? Some yeses, some nos.
I like the Headspace app.
Yeah, thank you. Headspace is a great app for doing mindfulness. What do you all know about mindfulness, or how might you give a summary of it? Some I don't knows. So mindfulness is a really trendy concept, and it's a Eastern philosophy that's pretty far-reaching. But if I were to sum it up in just a sentence or two, it's about being in the present moment and aware of what's happening around you with all of your senses. So really taking note of the sights, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, the texture, being really engulfed and immersed in your present moment, and also suspending judgment. So we have a tendency to evaluate things that come our way. And so it's this idea of letting go of that judgment, or earmarking it for a later time, but just really being present in the moment. Tense and relaxed muscles. This one I love. Who's ever done progressive muscle relaxation? Yeah, okay. Some yes and no's. So the basic idea behind this is to identify places in our body where we carry tension. And I know that being in front of a computer screen all day, that's oftentimes for me between my shoulders, it's my neck. For some people, they might hold it in their jaw. But it's the idea of going through our body and actually tensing those muscles. So one of the things you would do is to actually clench your fists, do it as hard as you can without hurting yourself, and then release it, kind of shake it out. And to go through our body, and to do this in different parts of our body. We can do it by clenching our jaws. We can do it by shrugging our shoulders and holding them here. And by actually, you're basically forcibly relaxing your muscles. Similar with a neck release, the body scan is again just noticing where you hold tension in your body. Visualization. So if you're a visual person, you can have a calm scene. That's sort of like a happy place that you go to. And so we're limited on time, but if we were to actually practice one of these things, what would be helpful for you all to try out in here? I could do a calm scene, and that sort of incorporates a little bit of mindfulness as well as some breathing. I have a script I can read through. I sort of like when there's like music and stuff in the background. So I'll play this link for you guys. It's about 5 minutes long. And that'll leave just a few minutes for questions at the end. All right.
Let's start by finding a comfortable position. When you're ready, close your eyes. Now take a few deep breaths. Inhaling slowly, and then exhaling slowly. Continue to breathe in and out. Your belly rising and falling. Enjoying the feel of the calming breath in and out. On the next exhale, imagine any tension that you're holding being released and flowing out of your body. Take another deep inhale and exhale. Feel your body already relaxing, already letting go. Now, you're going to use your ability to visualize and daydream. Let your worries drift away. If distracting thoughts or doubts come into your mind, let them float away like small clouds in a blue sky. Breathe slowly in and out. Imagine yourself at the edge of a beautiful, still lake. The sky is clear and blue above you, and the sun is sparkling on the water. Imagine yourself sitting at the edge of a dock with your feet dangling in the water. You can feel the rough wood of the dock with your fingers. It's warm from the sun. You feel a light breeze on your face. The breeze is creating ripples on the surface of the water. Everything around you so peaceful. Take another deep breath and relax. Imagine the smell of pine trees all around the lake. The taste of fresh, clean air. Listen to the sound of the water lapping up against the dock. The sound of birds singing in the trees. Imagine closing your eyes and just listening. Feeling the peacefulness of the place. Let go of all your worries and fears. You're breathing slowly in and out. Feel the warmth of the sun on your skin and the coolness of the water on your feet, soothing away all your tension. This place is so restful, so full of peace. Your mind is completely still. If you have any last thoughts or worries, let them drift away. Your body is rested and at peace. Take one more deep breath in and let it go. Keep breathing in and out. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. As you come back to your surroundings, make note of how you feel. Is your body more relaxed? Do you feel more calm and in control? If so, that is the power of your imagination. As our
All right. So I'm aware of the time. How is everyone feeling? Questions, comments, just general feedback. This is my mic.
In the chat, we have a couple people saying feeling relaxed. Mine feels slowed down. One person's dog barked during it, but they liked it.
All right.
My dog always barks. I should just make that part of the whole process.
All right. So just a general plug for CAPS. You know, we're taking new students and our wait list isn't too long right now. We have a few therapy groups as well that are going to be open in the spring. A survivors group for survivors of sexual violence. We're going to have a few undergraduate and graduate interpersonal groups, some anxiety-based groups. So refer away. Well, thanks everyone.